After the first 2 episodes of Hawkeye, it feels like the spec market has cooled off quite a bit. Well, in this video, we're going to talk about that. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another video with Swaggle Haas. And in this video, we got to talk about spec fatigue because it feels like there's been a lot of it in the comic book community as of late, especially when we look at some of the spec books related to the Hawkeye show, which we got the premiere of just last week. And in this video, I kind of wanted to take a look at some of the market with you guys, take a look at some of those Hawkeye spec books, see where their values are at, and then also later on talk about the idea of spec. And then at the end of the video, talk a little bit more as to why I feel like the spec market has cooled off. But before I get into the topic for today, if you guys could drop me a like or comment or subscribe if you're enjoying the content, help support the channel, do one of those things, I would appreciate it. But let's start by talking about Hawkeye, which of course premiered the other week. Now, I will not be going into spoilers in this video, so don't worry if you haven't seen the show yet. But I am going to talk about some of the books that relate to the show, and anything that I talk about is going to be stuff that you would have picked up from the trailers anyway, so there won't be spoilers here. But, for the most part, I very much enjoyed the show. I know it hasn't been rated the highest, and that could be a factor as to why some of the books have not, taken the world by storm yet. But I think that there are other reasons as to why they haven't gotten so hot. So let's take a look at some of these books and kind of look at some of the values and then sort of, talk about, why I think that this is actually the case, that they're not, taking the world by storm. But the first one here that I want to talk about is, of course, Hawkeye #2 from 2012. And this, of course, is the Matt Fraction run that the Hawkeye show has been based off of. And what is the significance of this book? Well, this particular book right here is the first team up of Hawkeye and Kate Bishop. Now, first team up of Hawkeye and Kate Bishop totally makes sense as to why people would want to spec on a book like this. I feel like if we were to have gotten Hawkeye at the beginning of the year, this would be a book that would be absolutely exploding. But when we look at some of, kind of a snapshot of some of the eBay sales, here I have one that is from October 3rd of 2021. So, take probably that would be like about 2 months ago, and we can see that the price for this book was about $50. It was a buy it now, and then you factor in $10 shipping. And then when we go to a book that sold just the other day, November 29th, 2021, we see that it actually has had a correction here at $40 with $6 shipping. So definitely a book that consistently, as you go through sort of the sold eBay prices, you can see this book having sold more at the beginning of the year than it was selling right now at the height of which these two characters are teaming up. Now, I understand that there might be, some people out there thinking to yourselves that, well, the market itself has corrected, and that is very, very true. Although there are a lot of blue chip key books that I still think are holding their values overall, even in proportion to Hawkeye itself, like the first appearance of Hawkeye, Tales of Suspense 57. So really, to me, it's more interesting to kind of evaluate the spec market as it relates to this kind of new sort of correction. And again, it could be another factor too as to why the books are not as hot. It's because, the reception for the show hasn't been as well received, although I don't think that that should play too much of a factor for us as far as like comic book speculators are concerned. All right, let's go on to the next book I want to talk about here. And this is also one, Hawkeye #1 from the same run I just talked about. And what is the significance of this? Well, this, of course, is the first appearance of the Lucky the Pizza Dog and also the Tracksuit Mafia. So Lucky the Pizza Dog, Tracksuit Mafia, two characters that I feel like, should 100%, be seeing new record highs with a book like this because of the fact that, we got those two characters in the Hawkeye show. Like if this were Falcon and Winter Soldier and WandaVision, any character that makes an appearance is always going to have a spike in the sales of their books. But when we go onto eBay right here, we can see a 9.8 CGC sold for $349 back in early October. And then we flash forward, a 9.8 CGC selling for $227 here in November 28th. So almost like $100 difference right there. Actually, a little bit more than $100 between the 9.8 sale, 2 months ago to the 9.8 sale now. Again, another correction that could be just endemic to the entire comic book market, but one that I think is more indicative of these speculation books that relate to the new Disney Plus shows. And then quickly, we can flash forward. Here's a Raw book that sold in October 3rd for $100. This was a live auction, bid that sold, around that price. And then flash forward here, another live auction, November 28th, we have $53. So again, even when you flash back the clock or you rewind the clock back to WandaVision, a lot of people, you guys might be thinking out there, well, people really buy into the hype. It's really the trailers that have the peaks with these sort of spec books. And then when the show comes, everyone doesn't care anymore and everyone forgets. Yes, I tend to generally agree with that, but you wouldn't necessarily see these numbers be correcting so hard, at least until like say a couple weeks after the completion of the show. In fact, if we were to wind the clock back to, WandaVision and Falcon Winter Soldier, when we got the Agatha Harkness reveal, the books that were being sold for her, which was Fantastic Four 94, those were getting peaks during the course of the show. Additionally, there were other spec books that when they had their week that they were relevant, that was actually when they had their all-time new highs. And then the last book I just kind of want to show you guys, because I have it pulled up, and before we move on to the next part of our conversation, is this one right here, Hawkeye #7. This is the first appearance of Eleanor Bishop, who is Kate Bishop's mother, a character who seems to have a prominent role in the Hawkeye show. And again, another book that feels like it would be a super hot spec right now, right? We saw Kate Bishop's mother. She's been in the show. She's playing a big role. And here we see a sale back in September, early September. Buy it now for $14. Now we flash forward to our current time, November 25th, and we see a buy it now for $14.99. So again, not exactly lighting up the lamps, so to speak. And if we talk about volume of sales too, when we look at some of those eBay sold items, I didn't have them pulled up for you guys, but just take my word for it that you see like a decent amount of sales. I mean, there have been some books moving, but it's not like what we saw earlier in the year with the spec books related to Falcon and Winter Soldier. I mean, we're seeing like maybe a couple sales a day, which really isn't too much overall when we're talking about volume and inventory being sold. In fact, I had a video yesterday where I did my comic book haul for Black Friday, and while I was out hunting, in these stores, I saw all of the Matt Fraction books like all over the place. Like all the shops had them, up on the wall on display, listing them at like those $25, $30 prices, trying to capitalize on the Hawkeye show. And, everywhere I went, they were just sitting there on the wall, which suggests to me that nobody was buying them because they were just sitting there all day. So that is really interesting. And that kind of, brings us to sort of the next part of this conversation where I wanted to talk about, this idea of spec and, spec fatigue and where we are kind of as comic book collectors in this current market. Because I really do feel like there's a lot of people out there that are sort of, getting tired of all the speculation. And I understand why they would be doing that, because there are channels like my YouTube right here, right, where I have a video that comes out where it talks about here's my hot spec pickups and things like that. I think spec has always been a dirty word sort of in our community. And I think that there's understandable reasons as to why people feel that way about speculation. But I do kind of want to clarify how I feel about spec. And when I talk about a book in terms of, speculation or a creative video that is a sleeper spec book video, ultimately what I'm trying to do as far as like the information I am putting out to you guys, because I'm not trying to generate FOMO. I'm not trying to flip my own books. What I'm actually trying to do is point out books that I think, you could find in an LCS for like $1, less than $5 usually. And at some point in the future, these books are going to have their 15 minutes of fame, and they're going to shoot up to like 20, 25, hey, maybe even $50 at some point in time. But they're not books that I think have long-term value or long-term intrinsic value that are going to be sought after for many years in the future. They're books that I think are interesting and at a certain point may have some kind of relevance to a show like a Hawkeye. And, I always say on this channel, a book is only as valuable as it is relevant to pop culture. I mean, I think that is something that if there's anything that, you guys can take away from me as far as like financials with comic books are concerned, that would be the one thing that I would always say is that, a book is only as valuable as it is relevant to pop culture, because of the fact that, this is a capitalistic hobby, it's supply and demand. And, if you don't have the demand side to the equation with these books where there's a constant churn for people who want to pick them up, you're never going to be able to sell them at their current peak prices. So, when we have a book like first team up of Hawkeye and Kate Bishop, yeah, it's really cool. Like, we're going to watch Hawkeye and we're going to see that team up, and that's going to be really awesome. And maybe there's going to be a point in the show where they're flinging bow and arrows together and everybody's going to jump on that Hawkeye #2 thing. And that'll be really, really exciting. But that right there is going to be the peak for that book, because that is the time when they teamed up, and that's the time that it is most relevant to pop culture. Now, once you get on the other end of that, the book could still maintain a certain amount of value, but it is unlikely that it is going to maintain its peak value after that happens, because even if we get movies in the future where Hawkeye and Kate Bishop are doing stuff, nothing is going to eclipse that first team up that occurs like in a Hawkeye #2, where if we compare this to, say, Amazing Fantasy 15, first appearance of Spider-Man. Yes, that book is going to take a spike because we have a Spider-Man movie coming out. But even movies aside, that book is always going to be relevant to pop culture, because there's always going to be video games being made for Spider-Man. There's always going to be comic books. There's always going to be, pajama pants with kids that have them. There's going to be stickers. There's going to be books. There's going to be all kinds of transmedia marketing for a character like Spider-Man. So when we're talking about, a first appearance of that character, that is always going to maintain some cultural relevance, and therefore it's going to maintain its value. And I actually think that the comic book collecting community has really started to catch wind of this overall. And that's one of the reasons why the spec market has cooled off for Hawkeye. It's because, if you're out there and you were someone who wanted to spec on some of these books because maybe you just wanted them in your collection, or maybe you decided you were going to flip them, or whatever you decided to do, I feel like those people, those savvy collectors, have already got their books. They already picked them up, even as far as a year ago, or even as far as, like, say 4 or 5 months ago. And now those same collectors who would have wanted to buy these books right now to collect them already have them, because they were like already being savvy in having picked them up before they got the show. And that's one thing to think about too, is that you don't have to be a speculator or a flipper or whatever to use a speculative brain when you are collecting comic books. I mean, you can just be a true passionate comic book collector, but you still need to pay attention to what movies are coming up, what shows are out there, so that you can be informed and get the book you want before it actually reaches new prices. And I think a lot of people are starting to do that. Now, piggybacking off of my last point, the last thing I wanted to talk about in this video is the access that the comic book collecting community has, even more so than, say, a year ago when everything was going crazy with Disney+. I mean, we have so many great YouTube channels out there. We have a lot of great apps out there. There's a lot of information for comic book collectors to get, information on key books or what to grab or things to get for shows, that I think, the comic book collecting community has really educated themselves in this last year, understanding when are good times to buy books, understanding what books to get before they get hot. And I think we are becoming a lot more savvy, a lot smarter as collectors. Additionally, on top of that, there's been a lot of new avenues to purchase comic books, not just eBay. I mean, I happen to show you guys the eBay sales, but we have things like Whatnot now. I mean, Instagram sales feel like they've been around for 15 years, even though they've only been around for less than a year. We have new websites like myslabs.com. We have new other avenues to pick up books. We have Facebook Marketplace, things like that. So I feel like a lot of people are picking up their comic books not just from eBay. And that means that, when we have all this inventory on eBay, it's going to sit there because there's so many other avenues for them to find their spec books. Well, anyways, that is all I have for this video. Let me know what you guys think. Do you feel like a general sense of spec fatigue out there in the market? I think that there is a little bit of fatigue, but I also think that there are other factors in play, mainly because I think the comic community has sort of caught wind to this game we're playing here, where everyone's trying to flip their books during the show. I think people have picked them up before they got hot. I think there's way more avenues to pick up these books on different platforms than just eBay. So I think that we're all becoming better collectors for it. Anyways, let me know what you guys think. Drop me a like, comment, subscribe if you're enjoying the content, and I will see you in the next video.